Welcome to the December 2021 webinar, our last one of the year, entitled When What's Bugging Me is Inaccessible. And I'm just going to start with some of the questions that you've seen already in the invitation, but they're worth repeating, I think, to kind of launch this thing. And then I'm going to explain why I'm doing this particular webinar. I'm going to do one thing to make sure that I get rid of background noise. Or at least I'm going to try. Good. And the questions are you haunted by doubts, worries, frustrations, irritability, or sadness? Do you have trouble focusing, staying present, maybe sleeping or eating properly? Or do you have physical concerns such as digestive disturbances, fatigue, headaches, aches and pains, even rashes or hair loss? Do even little things bug you? Have you been working on these issues for a long time, but unable to find a cause or a solution? Do you believe that feeling anxious, angry, sad, lonely, or suffering physical maladies, problems, that's just the way you are? I've been interested in this topic for a long time, and I'm going to tell you the history of where that came from. And I've been in kind of an unhappy place in this regard to things that are inaccessible. For decades, I've been critical of the medical model of psychology, human psychology, the model that labels unhappy feelings as mental disorders needing medication. Now, we all know, you probably hear this, people in a workplace that say, oh, I'm going to take a mental health day. I'm going to take a day off just for my psychological well-being. And, that's fine. It's in that direction of saying, my mental health is like if I had, a bruise or a cut, it's something that needs attention. In that kind of way. We put a medical way of thinking about it because we don't really understand what feelings are and what their purpose is. Feelings are us, they're part of us. And we usually do not, because of cultural, I think, habituation, as well as just the way we experience things. We say, I am sad instead of I am feeling sad, or I am angry instead of I am feeling angry. I learned when I first started studying German that they have a different way of expressing things like that. Now that the weather's cold, I can use that grammatical construction. We say, I'm cold. But a German says, es ist mir kalt, which means it is to me cold, the weather, meaning the environment. And so I feel cold. A German could say, I feel cold, but they don't say, I am cold. Because if you say that, I am cold, to a German, that means I am a cold sort of person. It means my personality is cold, as opposed to warm. So a German makes that distinction in the way they express themselves in their grammar. But here in the United States and in English-speaking countries, I guess, we don't say it that way. And so we say, I am angry instead, I have an angry feeling, or I'm feeling angry. We don't differentiate between oneself and one's experience. And I think that's a really important thing because particularly people in this topic tonight is really about people or about our experience, which everybody has some of, that there are certain things that are just like a part of us. It may be that we tend to worry or we tend to be sad or we tend to be angry. Um, any of these feelings that are like with us all the time, um, it's like psychologists speak of endogenous depression. It means it's in your biochemistry. What they're really saying when they say that is, we don't know why you feel that way. You just do, and you always do, or at least most of the time. And sometimes it's really strong, and sometimes it's not so strong. And we often just don't know why. And we don't seek why because it's very hard to get at. One of the reasons that drugs have become the therapy of choice is that psychotherapy is a long process in most cases, particularly for people that have had a feeling that goes on pretty much all the time throughout their lives. Granted, there may be days when they don't notice it, and or periods of time when they don't notice it, but there's sort of this quality to a person, that they're sad, or that they're lonely, or any of those other feelings. Psychologists also use the term trait anxiety, which is to say, you're just anxious. That's who you are. Now, even in Ayurveda, we recognize that certain people come into the world with what looks like a vata imbalance. And so we tend to blame, the physiology. Oh, it's vata in the physiology, as opposed to saying the person has a tendency to worry and we don't know why. And what this whole webinar is about is how to get at what is hidden from our awareness when it's inaccessible. Something is bothering me. I use the term bugging me in the title of this just to be playful. When something is bothering me, and it's kind of always like that. And then maybe things happen in one's life, my life. I'll give you a personal example. I tend to feel sadness strongly. When I say sadness, it's grieving strongly whenever it comes up. And it comes up when something happens that involves a loss, particularly, as so many of my peers now are leaving their bodies and moving on to, we always say, higher realms. But that kind of thing. And I sense, oh, there's this loss, and it's sad. And some people, I feel, went too early. And others, it was a long ordeal and it was difficult and things like that. And I don't think that's unusual at all. And it certainly don't believe that it's pathological. And I don't think it needs medication. And I have never been medicated, but I easily feel sadness. I also feel anxious very easily. And over the last couple of 3 months, I seem to be in a cycle where, I kind of wake up in the morning feeling anxious, and I'm worrying sometimes about very specific things. But the tendency to worry is something that's always kind of in me. And I've noticed, just a personal insight, but it may be useful to you, that anxiety, that tension that develops within me is kind of a prompt to me to put attention on something, to take care of it. But when the anxiety is very strong in the morning, it costs me sleep. And that's not a good thing, because then I don't function as well during the day. So it's not a very useful method of pushing myself into taking care of business. Much better would be that I just take care of business, which is actually the way I function most of the time. But sometimes I wake up and I am worried about particularly finances. That's my thing. And I'll think about, gee, there's that thing I didn't check out. It was on my credit card or something. And I don't know why that was there. And I got to go take care of that. And it usually is nothing more than just going to the website and looking up what the charge was and who made the charge. And then usually I don't know why. I can figure it out from the information they give me. But it's that kind of thing. It's like, oh my God, I got to go deal with this. And, it's not something that's a lot of fun. It's kind of tedious. And, I don't sit there and think like, boy, if you attended to it now, then you'd put it behind you. Excuse me. and you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. I'm going to pause for a drink of water. Gee, and I went into this feeling like I had a good, strong voice tonight. But fortunately, I had plenty of water. So tonight we want to look at those things that are hidden from our awareness and that, but are bugging us nevertheless. And just use or describe, and then in the group clearing session, which will not be recorded for the YouTube, so you won't see that if you're on YouTube. But I'm going to describe the process by which we can bring things that are inaccessible to us, that are not, that we don't know what they are, where they're coming from, and bring those into our awareness. And when I should even preface that at this point by saying, many times those are things we brought into this lifetime with us. They're part of our karma. And so one of the things that's important in this work that I do is to check and see if there are karmic influences or familial patterns, because a lot of times these things are our karma that play out in our families. And oftentimes there's generations, many generations even, that have suffered the same kind of problem. And so part of that is learned, but part of that is our karma to have learned that in this lifetime, that or what looks like we learned it in this lifetime. But kind of the point about it not being accessible is that most of these things psychologists cannot help people get at because they're part of their early childhood experience. It's the structure of their environment. Most children will not say, I had angry parents or I had distant parents. They may know the parent was absent, but if a parent, does live at home and is home very regularly, but it's their style, their personality style. They may be very distant, cold kind of personality, not warm and loving and caring and putting a lot of attention on kids. And little kids need a lot of attention. And in a very busy world, often a world where both parents work, the child is away from their parents all day, or at least much of the day. And then when they come home, both parents are tired and they're not ready to really just play and have fun with the kids and let the kids be kids. Let the kids turn them into let the kids turn the adults into children to play with them, to have playmates. So these things are not usually accessible when they are kind of that sense that we have, they're a part of us. But that doesn't mean we can't. We just need a way of getting there. And the fundamental way of getting there, in my notion, is to turn to what we feel. So let's just use the example of anxiety. And you feel like, oh, I tend to worry a lot. It's not like it's excessive or that I'm paralyzed, but I worry a lot. And that, I can feel that it takes a toll on me. And so to use an approach, it's very simple. We can turn to the feeling when we have a moment, a little time to sit with it and just say something inside me feels or is worrying. Something inside me is worrying. Now, this language is very important, and it comes from the world of what's known as focusing, specifically in this case, inner relationship focusing. And I was very fortunate to attend a webinar, a short webinar on not feeling, and I actually was able to ask a question, get a response back about those things that are inaccessible. And so I got some guidance about doing this in this way. And I do it quite a lot, actually. So I'll be aware that I'm worrying, and I just go, something inside me is worrying. It's the language that helps us to get in touch with where that is coming from. because oftentimes we don't even know what we're worrying about. It's just that we have that feeling that we're anxious. And that's very annoying to me. It's like, I don't know what I'm worried about, but I'm worried, you know. And sometimes I know what I'm worried about, but I have this sense that the tendency to worry is driven by something that this is only a trigger for, a reminder in my body, to my body and to my psychology that, oh, you worry about this. I said earlier, I tend to worry about finances. And so if there's something I haven't attended to, yeah, I tend to worry about it. Um, and it's not a terrible thing, but for some people, it can be very terrible. Some people are extremely anxious. And usually they wind up being medicated if they're willing to go that route, or they'll take some natural products to try to deal with their tendency to worry. And sometimes it just really gets out of hand. And that's really kind of a shame when that happens, when that tendency is overwhelming in that way. And they can't function very well. They can't make decisions, or they can't get things done, or they're not sleeping well, which makes it even worse, right? Because one of the things that helps you to deal with emotional stuff is to be well rested. And so practical things like going to bed early and not taking things that are stimulating like caffeine can be very, very valuable. And oftentimes for some people, if they're doing a lot of things that aggravate the body in that way, like staying up late and maybe, drinking coffee or tea that's caffeinated, or other beverages, just changing those habits often can bring quite a bit of relief. So we mustn't forget about those. But in terms of dealing with it on the level of the energy of the psychology, what's driving that psychology, we want to turn inward. And so we can sit quietly, even close the eyes. Oftentimes it helps to put a hand on where that sensation is in the body. Although I know people that'll say it's all over my body, and that's perfectly fine. You can say, I feel this, I feel like I'm worrying, I'm worrying all over my body. And then you can add just a couple of simple sentences. One way, you can do it either way here. You can say, and I'm here with that. Or you could say, and that's okay. I'm here with that. You can make notes if you want to. I'm here with that. Or you could say, and that's okay. And what you're conveying is that I am watching myself worry, and I'm not trying to change that. I accept the fact that I worry. And the strategy behind that is very simple. If we try to get rid of feelings, we can hide them, but they tend to show up in painful ways, either in the way we're thinking or feeling, or they can show up if we do it long enough, meaning years usually, it'll show up in the body. And so a lot of times we find that people have these worries in the body and they don't know why. And what they really need to do is just attend to the fact that it's there. I have this feeling in my body, and that's okay. Or I am here with that. And when we do that, it allows that to breathe some energy into it. Prana, if you want to think of it that way, put some energy into that, begins to open that up so that we can relax. Now, we don't try to make ourselves relax. We don't try to make it go away. It does it on its own. It's as if that feeling needed us simply to attend to it at a subtle level of our consciousness. And then sometimes what happens is in that process is, oh, it's this sort of thing. I worry about money. Okay, something inside me is worrying about money. And it feels like, and then you describe it. And it's nice to you. You can use an analogy. You can either try to describe it precisely, or you can say, it feels like, and then whatever it feels like. And that's perfectly okay. me take another sip. So I held the cup up and then didn't have the microphone turned back on. Only the best dads get promoted to be grandpa, or promoted to grandpa. And I do a lot of grandparenting these days. Anyway, turning inward and just looking at the feelings. Now, supposing this was based on some childhood trauma or even a past lifetime trauma, it actually doesn't make any difference which it is. And it may have been both. I've run into that quite a bit, where whatever was in the past that needed to be worked out in this lifetime is repeated in this lifetime in order to process that, to give us a chance to process it. And we may not remember that it was trauma, but we may get a sense as we're turning inward that, oh, whenever I have to face this kind of a situation, or whenever somebody criticizes me, or, whatever, and I find myself reacting, it's always been that way. I always react. That something inside me has been there for a long time, and it's concerned about. And then what happens is sometimes we get a little insight. It's trying to protect me. It's trying to keep me safe. It's trying to keep me from hurting. Anger is often like that. Anger is often a defense against pain. So you get angry about a situation so you don't feel the crushing pain inside. And so it's not necessary to relive that trauma, but just, oh, I have this feeling. And it seems to come from way back. Doesn't matter what it was. And when I do my energy work, people often ask me, well, why am I like this? And I go like, even if I know, I get some insight when I'm doing the work. It's like, I don't want to tell you. You've heard me say this probably lots of times if you've listened to my webinars. I don't want to tell you why, because it becomes part of your story. People do the same thing with astrology. I've discovered, well, I didn't discover it. I think a lot of people know it. It's like, oh, I blame my planets, and so there's nothing I can do. I'm just, instead of, well, no, this is actually your planets, so to speak. Your karma is trying to teach you a lesson if you're willing to learn it. So turn to it instead of running away from it. So I use that phrase, turn to the feelings. Turn to what's bugging you. The feeling of being bugged, rather, is what I'm saying. Turn to the feeling. You don't even have to ask why I feel this way. It's not a useful question, not because you won't get an answer, but because getting the answer doesn't usually solve the problem. You may feel sad much of the time. And whenever you have to say goodbye to people, that, it's like that's kind of heavy thing for you. And maybe even for a day or two afterwards, you feel, pretty bad. And all they've done is gone, on a trip or something. They're out of town. But you're like already missing them, and you're feeling that. And so you may get the sense when you're inside there and you're looking like, oh, something inside me feels sad. Oh, it's about abandonment. And that's all you need to know. Oh, it's about something inside me feels abandoned and sad because it was abandoned. And then you just sit with that, and you can even say, and that's okay. Particularly if you find your mind wandering onto something else that is meaningless, it's like, oh, and that's okay. Right? Because you want to be able to stay with it, but you don't have to hold it. You don't have to hold it tightly, but just, acknowledging that it's okay. It's okay. And that just, then the air starts to come, the prana, vital breath comes. You can even sometimes take a deep breath. You'll feel yourself take a deep breath. When I'm working with people, they're often at a very deep state. And if I happen to open my eyes and look, and we're on Zoom like this, and, I can see them, I'll actually see them take the breath, or sometimes I'll hear it. Um, but oftentimes they take a big breath. I can actually, it's like that kind of a breath. And they're still very deep. They're not even aware of it. But and I don't usually look, but sometimes I become aware of that. And I've noticed that when I feel the release while I'm doing the energy work, I can then open my eyes and see that they take a deep breath as they release that energy that they've been holding on to for so long. And again, they don't have to work through or even remember, either a trauma or a lonely feeling, or just a difficult situation that may have, produced something that's there, or past life thing. It's not really useful most of the time to know what happened. And it tends to become part of our story and an excuse. When I say part of our story, it means we start using it as an excuse. It's the kind of thing, if you catch yourself, so you say, oh, somebody says to you, how are you doing? He's like, oh, I tell you, it's a rough time. I'm really going through it. I'm having this and that and the other thing. And it's all because of, something that happened when I was a kid, or it's because of my planets, or, whatever. And that's just a story. And you can tell that story 100 times and things don't get better. And that's why psychological approaches often don't work very well. It's one of the reasons why they take so long and often don't work very well, is because we get caught up in a story. And, in psychologists, we go, well, how do you feel about that? And he said, I feel horrible about that. I said, well, I've always felt horrible about that. And it's not getting any better. And I've been coming to you for months and years, and it's still not getting better. And that's because they simply haven't created that situation where they can release it by taking the awareness to a subtle level and just letting the thing, just being with it, and just letting it unfold itself and release itself. So with that, let me see if there's anything else we need to do. I don't think so. Let me stop here and see if there are any questions. You can, best way to do that is to put them in the chat, which is on a computer that's normally in the toolbar or the menu at the bottom of your screen. I'm not sure where that shows up on a cell phone. You may have to hit the 3 little dots or lines that indicate that you can do more, and then you can chat and type in a little something. So I'll take just a few moments for that. And then in January, we'll have a different sort of, it's a webinar, it would be the same style, but a little bit different topic. It's going to be January 11th, will be that webinar in 2022. And it will be called A Kind Way to Approach Loss and Grieving. And I'm doing this one on loss and grieving because I'm finding that that's a very common experience these days in so many realms in life, but just loss and grieving of people, particularly in my community, who passed away. And loss and grieving are normal human experiences. I mean, we all know that. But the grieving can really go on for a long time. And I do know people for whom grieving is so intense that it is debilitating, at least at times in their lives. So it's often long lasting and intense and seemingly permanent. And the question comes, will this ever go away? And the short answer to that question is it will get better, but we will always feel that because it's part of a normal experience and part of the normal memory. So it becomes tolerable, it becomes okay, but it doesn't dominate our life. Anyway, I read some articles about grieving, and I came to believe that the experts weren't seeing the big picture about grieving, and that they were focusing, first of all, there's the thing about the stages of grieving. I think there are 4 stages of grieving. And it's like, okay, if we understand that there are stages of grieving, we can watch ourselves, we can rate ourselves. Oh, we're in that stage, and we're in this stage. Sometimes we jump back and forth. between stages, but eventually we come out of it to a point where, oh, we're not actively grieving anymore. And then I saw another article that listed a set of, well, they really were goals. They really weren't ways of getting to something. They were basically saying that you're going to go through this, and you're going to get out. And I thought, no, you're not seeing the strategies that are needed to achieve the goals. And that's really the thing that's most important. You really have to know the strategies. It's okay to know the stages. That's helpful to a degree. And it's okay to know the goals, what it looks like to get over grieving, but how you get over it, that's something I thought I had something to contribute to. So we're going to be doing that. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'm going to end the recording here. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and those who have watched on YouTube. Much appreciated. I have a YouTube channel, Partnership for Wellbeing, and I have lots and lots of videos up there on many, many topics. So please check them out. We'll see you in January.